The biggest game of the year is really just about a day ahead of us now. Winnipeg versus Dallas. Who will win and decide the Central? Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are just really hours away from the biggest game of the season, Winnipeg versus Dallas. This game, I know it was circled on a lot of our calendars for a while, but I don't know that we all thought this might be the one that not only decides the Central and West, but potentially gets you really close to the President's Trophy. More so for the Jets, I think, than Dallas. Dallas, I think, is still, not quite far enough away from the Caps to really have that sort of luxury. They are 1 point behind, but the Jets are 3 points ahead. Obviously, the Caps do have a game in hand, but assuming the Jets do win this game against Dallas, that also adds a little bit more to Winnipeg's first overall ranking. So everything right now is coming up Jets. I think, where Winnipeg is in the standings, a lot of the playoff seeding, all of it for the most part is looking pretty dang good. And the injury news continues to be pretty decent. Neil Pionk is actually a game-time decision for the Jets against Dallas, which is a big deal. Sandberg and Pionk were practicing earlier today, so very good news on that respect. Luke Schenn went back home for a little bit. He'll be back, I'm sure, in Dallas tomorrow. And, I don't know what exactly that means for the Jets' third pairing. I've seen some concern that maybe we finally see Stanley Schenn. What I'm hoping is that Colin Miller, who has been sick the last day or two, is well enough to come back in. He did not really practice in the pairings this evening or this afternoon, but hopeful that he draws back in. I would love to see Schenn Miller as a pairing. I feel like that should be your third pairing heading into the playoffs. But we know Arniel does kind of like himself some Stanley, so maybe we will see the big pairing, right? Quite literally big. 6'7", and Schenn, who's what, like 6'5" or something. They are both big dudes. So a lot of size, not a lot of mobility. I don't know if that's going to be an issue against Dallas necessarily, but against faster teams, you might want to limit that pairing just a bit. But having Sandberg and Pionk back together would be really, really beneficial. As far as the Jets lines coming into this game are concerned, not really any changes. CSI still on the top line. Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti on the second. Tanev, Lowry, and Appleton on the third. And Gus, Barrett, and Anderson Dolan on the fourth. So Ehlers still a game time decision. My feeling is because the Jets have played so well without Nick that they're not really eager to rush him back. That shot block that he had to his foot probably did crack something. And I'm sure that they don't want to lose him heading into the playoffs, right? So if there's a way that they don't have to risk him, I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they're just being a little more cautious and making sure that, given how the Jets have been without this guy, they are not as concerned about playing him until you start getting closer to the postseason. Let him heal up. Let him be 100%. Don't rush him back. And once he's ready for the postseason, you are good to go. So we'll just have to wait and see for that. Kupari also did take a couple of laps in the non-contact, so good to hear that he is starting to get better. Obviously, the lingering concussion stuff was not fun, so glad to hear that he is finally feeling a little bit better. But Jets are starting to get healthier. Velarde's really the last big piece that's maybe still a little bit further out, but obviously having Gabriel back will be a huge boost for this top nine. Where he gets played is a very interesting question. I know a lot of people have thought he should just go back on the first line, but I'm really not convinced. I'd love to see him deployed somewhere on the second or third line and to give the Jets some really good looks, because I feel like CSI has been so dominant to where I just don't think you should break up that trio, which I never thought I'd be saying, but here we are. They've been so good, so impressive, and if they have another big game against the Stars, I just don't see how you split them up. Anything that can get Connor and Scheifele to really control offensive zone time for me is a net positive. So A lot of interesting stuff there. But for the Stars, right now their current lines are looking like Robertson, Hintz, and Rantanen on the first, Marchment, Duchesne, and Gronlund on the second, Ben, Johnston, and Bork on the third, and then Bach, Steele, and Dodonov on the fourth. On blue line, you've got Harley and Labushkin, Lindell and Cece, and Bitchell and Dumba on the third. So you can kind of tell where their big weakness is, and it's on the blue line. In a previous game, I think it was against Pittsburgh, Cece and Harley actually ran into each other. Cece, I don't think he was really aware. Harley just sort of skated towards him, and there was some sort of a miscommunication. They lost the puck, and Pittsburgh ended up scoring the game winner. So, this blue line, not particularly mobile, not particularly strong defensively. The challenge then has been kind of slowing this offense down because in a lot of these games, the Stars have been getting outshot by a pretty fair margin, but the Smith and Ottinger have really cleaned up a lot of those mistakes. And it just seems like they find the opportune goal when it matters most. It's really frustrating because they've had really bad shot differentials for like a month now. I do think it's starting to catch up to them. Their last couple of games, they've started dropping points repeatedly, which has helped the Jets a ton. It also sets up this game really as the one that should decide the Central. It's a 4-point swing with the actual points remaining for the magic number being 5. This is a huge opportunity for the Jets to come away with basically the game that decides not only the Central, but the West. And so this feels like, for me, the biggest game of the season. If you can guarantee yourself home ice advantage throughout the playoffs, you get the number 1 seed, you'll avoid some of the bigger problems in the opening rounds of the postseason. This is as good as it gets. The Jets have one of the best records in all of the NHL when it comes to their home performance. They are 29-6-4, and it's not like their road record's bad. It's 24-15-0, which is pretty darn good. But obviously, being at home is a fortress. It gives you that home ice advantage. And for the Jets, the whiteout crowd is absolutely the one that you want to have on your side. So what a run it's been. I feel like we are finally getting to the promised land, as it were. And, you look at the Central Division and how crazy it is this year. There is not one team in the top 3 that is below 100 points. Not one. Every other division has, at most, maybe one team at 100 or over points. The Central has 3. That just doesn't seem possible. But here we are. Your worst team in the top 3 is Colorado at 100 points. Crazy, man. And somehow the Jets have risen to the top of this, right? And Connor Hellebuck, man, this is his heart year. He's already got the Jennings. He's going to get the Vezina. Why not add one more incredibly illustrious award to his record, right? Winnipeg has been very good this year, and he has been a huge part of that as well. So really would love to see him walk away with one of the biggest trophy hauls of any single player in a season. For how good he's been this year and how good this team has been, it just feels like, a nice kind reward for what he really deserves. He's been a heart level player for years now, but obviously they just don't like to give it to non-skaters. So crossing fingers, he finally gets his. It would be amazing. He's doing what Carey Price did several years ago, but somehow even better compared to league average. But amidst all of this, I guess there comes to be a question of who do we want the Jets to face in the first round? My personal feeling is that I still would prefer Minnesota, just because I feel like the Blues would give a harder time to Vegas. But I don't know. How the Jets played against St. Louis the other night does give me some question about, which opponent really would be the better opportunity, because you also want to think about how quickly you can get through that first round. If you have more time to rest and heal up, that's probably a bigger advantage. But we'll chat about that in just a brief moment. Before we go too much further, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. I'm honestly somebody who likes the shelled variety. Cracking one open is a nice little reward. It's very easy. You get a little protein nut inside. It's always tasty. And, of course, Wonderful Pistachios has tons of great seasonings. And, of course, it's a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. But maybe you just need something that's fast and easy. And they also have the no-shell variety for you, so it's convenient. You just grab a pack, whether you're on the way to the gym, dropping the kids off, or you need something at the office that is healthy for you but gives you a nice little pick-me-up. Wonderful Pistachios is here to help, and if you want to learn more, you can get snackin and get crackin with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are just chatting a little bit about the first round of the playoffs, right? It is just a few weeks away, and the Jets have a general sense of who they're going to be playing. It's either St. Louis or Minnesota. As of right now, it looks to be the Blues, but of course, the Wild are currently underway. They are winning against the Sharks, and St. Louis just got kicked off against the Oilers. Obviously, the Wild do have a game in hand, but they are currently 2 points back. So, assuming the scoreline holds over the next hour or so, they will be tied with the Blues. And then St. Louis later this evening will have a chance to either pull away further or perhaps they'll just kind of stay in place if they drop this result. So, I've wondered a little bit about who the Jets should want to face because at first I was very much on the train of letting it be the Wild, where, Minnesota, I think, especially without Kaprizov, has been just not the same team. But Kirill is, I think, supposed to come back for the playoffs last I saw. And if that's the case, Minnesota's offense does become a fair bit more potent. But by the same token, the Jets also have kind of locked down both of these teams. Minnesota has been, quite frankly, a little broed by the Jets throughout the season. And the Blues just got little broed by Winnipeg the other day. So really, for the Jets, there's not a bad option here. I think from my perspective, it's who you would rather the Knights face. Do you think Minnesota is going to give the Knights more trouble, or do you think it's going to be the Blues? My personal feeling is it would be St. Louis. I think the Blues can honestly go toe-to-toe with Vegas in some areas. Obviously, the defense is not one of those particular regions. I think the Knights have a much more mobile, much more effective blue line. But offensively, the Blues have a couple of the top line combos of any top six in the league. So that talent differential might be enough to match what the Knights have in guys like Eichel, Stone, etc. Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich, those guys, easily some of the best players in this conference. And so I kind of lean towards wanting the Blues to be the team that takes on Vegas. I think I also trust Binnington and Hofer a little more than I do Gustafsson and Fleury. Gustafsson, I think, is better than all of those goalies, but by the same token, I also kind of feel like, you're only going to see one of these goalies in the postseason, and I just feel like Binnington maybe has a slight edge. I don't know. It's probably a bit of a wash, but for the Jets, you obviously want an opponent that's going to prolong the series, tire the Knights out, and make it hard for them to get through. Vegas is one of the few teams that, you probably worry a little bit about during the playoffs, but then again, the Jets also just humiliated them on the road the other night. So does Winnipeg really fear anyone? Probably not. I think you just have to kind of look at which of these series gives you the so-called easier route through the postseason, right? You want to get through as healthy as you can, as rested as you can, and you want to be prepared for the subsequent rounds because, like I always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So whichever one gets you not necessarily the easiest route, but, well, yeah, I mean, I do kind of think of it that way. You want the one that's the path of least resistance because there's just no easy paths through the West. There are easier paths, but nothing here is simple. Every team is, for the most part, pretty good or at least halfway decent, all the way up to, cup contender status. So that also includes the Jets. But, you look at the Eastern playoff picture, and it's just not as scary as the West, right? I think the East maybe has three teams that honestly would struggle to even be in the playoffs at this point if they were in this side of the bracket. So not to disparage the East, but, yeah, West is best. Because of that, I think it's also really important that whoever the Jets get, you try and get through as quickly as possible. You don't want to have 6 or 7 game series prolonging it. The East is probably going to be having a slightly easier pathway. They may get some more time off. The Atlantic Division, for my take, is probably the better of the two. I just feel like there's some really quality postseason squads there. The Metro is decent, but, are the Jets really afraid of any of these teams? Probably not. They've shown that they can beat the Caps. I think that they could probably do reasonably well against Tampa and Toronto. I think it would be a very tight series. But again, that's much further in the future. For now, though, the Jets really just want to focus on the first round and get through it. You don't want to overlook either St. Louis or Minnesota, but let's be real, right? These two teams are in the wild cards for a reason. And while I do think the Blues have really turned it on lately, the Jets honestly just dominated them without Ehlers, Velarde, and Pionk, right? Three of Winnipeg's key contributors. And so, I do wonder who really is the better matchup for Vegas, right? Who do you want the Knights to play? So drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Again, I still lean towards wanting it to be the Wild that the Jets face, but maybe you feel differently. Maybe you think that Winnipeg can get through St. Louis faster, and that's more important. In the second round, I have a suspicion that we're going to be seeing Colorado. I just feel like that's likely to happen. Dallas, for me, has been not that good recently. I know that their record is still very strong and they found ways to win, but if you actually look at the way that they're playing in a lot of these games, I just feel like a series against the Avs is going to spotlight where the Stars have been really deficient. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe, in the 6 or 7 game series, perhaps even 5, it doesn't make enough of a difference. But, I always say that the trend is your friend. And if the trend doesn't really look that impressive, to me, eventually that will show against a top-end team. It did last year when the Jets got, mollywopped by the Avs in the first round. The Jets coming into that run, yes, they had won several games in a row. They were on a hot streak. But if you looked at the way the Jets were actually playing during that streak, they weren't really controlling play, right? It was a lot of Hellebuck and some good finishing. And yes, they did kind of embarrass the Avs in the last game of the year, but I just didn't really feel confident in it. It didn't feel like a true reflection of that Jets team's quality. To me, I thought what happened in the first round was a much bigger sign of where the Jets were weaker. And so I kind of feel the same way about the Stars, where if Dallas gets into an early series here with the Avs, which is pretty much guaranteed, I don't really feel like they're going to come out of that one looking all too good. That's just my personal feeling. Be curious to know what your prediction is. But looking at the way the Stars have played and how the Avs have played, I would put money on Colorado being the team that comes out of that one. And for the Jets, that's not ideal. You don't really want to match against the playoff Avs, but I'm hopeful this year that it's going to be different. I feel like the way the Jets have played against top teams that are really fast this season has generally been stronger. The only thing is you're going to have to figure out how to try and slow down McKinnon and Makar, and that is very difficult. Quite frankly, silencing either of those players takes a Herculean effort. The Jets did, I think, have a game earlier this year where they managed to kind of keep them off the board and really off balance. But in a series, I just don't know that you have that luxury. It's a lot tighter, it's a lot harder, and for the Jets, probably not something that they're going to get away with every single game. Assuming the Jets do actually get through the first couple of rounds, after that, you would then face what? Probably a Vegas or something. The Knights would be very intriguing to me. I think, a series against Vegas for the conference finals would be a really good chance for the Jets to reauthor their own history and to try and correct, a mistake that happened in 17-18. We got really unlucky that playoff run. The Jets should have gone on to the Cup Finals. They were the better team that year, and, Marc-Andre Fleury goalieing us while Hellebuck maybe had not the best playoff run ever, kind of put the Jets in a tough spot. But now this year feels different. I feel like if there ever was a season for the Jets to change the narrative and to finally be seen as a true playoff threat, it's got to be this season, right? This has to be the year that the Jets go deep. Winnipeg has come too far to let it slip now. And if they can vanquish, one of Minnesota or St. Louis, the Avs and Vegas, that would be fantastic. The Blues, Avs, and Knights have all been, to some level, a playoff boogeyman. They've all beaten the Jets at some point over the past couple of years. And so getting to have a run against all of these teams and vanquishing all of them would be fantastic. It would exactly be the sort of narrative that makes this team, in my mind, a team of destiny. Again, we are talking way in the future at this point. You really have to kind of keep it focused to the first round and focus on each round as it comes. But maybe it's just the confidence that I have in this team to finally correct some of their old mistakes and to get past, some of the problems that they've had in previous years. I'm hopeful. I really am. I feel like this team finally is on a path to greatness, and I just hope that they get rewarded at the end of it with, not only some great trophies and banners, but a Stanley Cup. That would be pretty friggin' cool. But amidst all of this, there also was a very interesting tidbit from 32 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman about, not only the Jets coaching staff, but also the job security of Kevin Cheveldayoff. He apparently is locked in here in Winnipeg, which we all knew, but it's very interesting to hear Chipman talk about it in such a open manner. Is it something that we should be worried about? How do we all feel about Chevy's job so far? And do we feel like he should just be handed the job, period? I want to chat about that and, kind of expectations with this team in just a little bit. But before we do, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Bear Mattress.
Do you have trouble sleeping? If so, you're not alone. That used to be me, lacking rest, tossing and turning. I was late for meetings. I never felt like myself. That's until I found Bear Mattress. Bear Mattress and their sleep recovery technology helped me fall asleep faster, as well as enjoy deeper sleeps. I felt like myself again, and you can too. Bear Mattress knows that every sleeper is different. That's why they have their sleep quiz on their website that finds you your perfect match. As a side sleeper, I matched with the Elite Hybrid mattress, and I've been telling everyone in my life they have to try Bear Mattress risk-free. You can sleep on your Bear Mattress up to 120 nights, and if you're not getting the best sleep of your life, you can get it refunded. They'll pick it up with absolutely no hassle. So go to bearmattress.com and use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are just wrapping up with some final thoughts on interesting commentary from Chipman on Cheveldayoff and his job so far, and how he intends to have Cheveldayoff even outlast him. I've personally been a little mixed with Chevy over the years. I know it's often said that he has the hardest job in the NHL, and I do think that that is relatively true. The Jets operate in a market that's very small, where attendance and revenue continues to be a bit of a concern. Recently, we've finally been able to abate that a little bit. We're getting more corporate sales from what it sounds like. Fan attendance is through the roof. And so finally we can, not see that being talked about constantly. But I think with, Cheveldayoff's overall job, I just feel it's very interesting to say so publicly that you are locked into somebody, right? Oftentimes, you hear votes of confidence and you're like, yeah, this is my guy. I like him. We are happy with his performance. But Chipman going out of his way to say that they're not going to reach the end of Chevy's contract, they never will, that they will keep extending him and stuff, I think is it's nice to have that vote of confidence. I don't think it's the best thing to say as an org if, you want to be seen as a meritocracy, right? I get Chipman's point about, there being some moments and bumps in the road, which I think is completely honest and fair. That is true. You're not going to have a successful season every year, but I feel like with Chevy, having the backing of the front office and stuff, and really the job security being locked tight, does that if this team starts to underperform and if this team starts to struggle to perform in the playoffs, how do you get out of that? Do you think Chevy is going to be the guy every year to do it? And I just don't know. I think Chevy has a lot of good things that he's done. I think that his drafting record has gotten better recently. I think that a lot of the trades the Jets have made more recently have generally been more positive. But I also sort of wonder, in the areas where the Jets have some clear blind spots, like how they want to give Pionk a huge contract and their love of Logan Stanley, are those things big enough to hurt the Jets longer term? Because with all of that, there's a downstream impact of every choice, right? The love for Logan Stanley has cost you Kovacevic. It's cost you Chisholm. It may eventually sideline Ville Heinola when he eventually leaves. And so you're losing three potentially better blue liners for a guy because you really love his size and you really love that particular pick. And so I wonder, right? What would it take for the Jets to ever have to make a change? I don't really feel like I'm in favor of change for the sake of change. And to be clear, I don't think Chevy has to go at all right now. I think he's done a pretty good job. But I also look at the trade deadlines the past couple of years. I feel like Winnipeg has maybe a little bit underwhelmed at some of these. The Timo Meyer year maybe was a bit beneficial that it didn't happen for the Jets that way. But, I think it just shows that when the Jets go shopping, more often than not, they always settle for like depth options. This year, it seems like Shen and Tanev have fit in quite nicely. And so, we haven't had as many issues with it because the core of the team continues to play really strong 5v5 hockey. And so, so far, we're not really feeling the impacts of a more modest TDL. But, if you go into the playoffs and suddenly it becomes, a real problem, was that something that Chevy should be responsible for? And I find it a very interesting thing that Chipman would really lock it down and say that Chevy is basically unmovable. You don't really hear teams talk like this. There's really not an organization out there that I can think of that is this committed to a single person. So, it's not the kind of thing right now that I'm really worried about. But I think for the future, I don't love that sort of thinking. I would always kind of look at the results, look at the process, and if there is a very clear mismatch amongst all of these pieces, you should have the conversation. Again, I don't think that they have the conversation anywhere in the near future because so far, I think Winnipeg has really done a generally great job. But again, it's just it's a fascinating thing and something that I don't know that I've ever really heard an NHL team say so publicly before. That you look at your man behind the front desk, and you really are committed to him. You don't intend to really assess any of the performances in the thought of maybe needing to make a change. You are locked in. You are committed, and Chipman even saying he expects Chevy to outlast him with the org is fascinating. So a lot of interesting stuff there. I wonder if the next person who eventually succeeds Chipman comes in and feels the same way, right? That might not be as likely to happen. But it's very interesting how the Jets have generally been pretty locked tight with job security. It's been the case with a lot of their coaches. Maurice probably would have been here for a bit longer had he not resigned himself. So, yeah, I think that for now isn't a problem, but hopefully it doesn't become one in the future. Curious to know all your thoughts on that. Are you okay with that? Is that something that worries you for the far future? Let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. I appreciate you all listening. Tomorrow, obviously, we'll have a recap of Winnipeg versus Dallas. Crossing my fingers, but actually in some ways expecting a win to be our recap. But we'll see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.